So I greet everyone. So today we'll be talking briefly about an interesting topic. I guess either you have been a victim or probably you have found yourself in a position where you've probably been the assailant. But today we'll be talking about what is familiar at the workplace, what some people term as having bosses that make the environment to be toxic for them. So today we'll be talking briefly about workplace harassment, bullying, and violence. We also spend some time to talk about the strategies to addressing psychosocial threats in today's work environment. A minute, let me adjust the screen. Yeah, before I welcome our guests for the day. Okay, so before I go on, I would like to have the guest speaker put on their videos and the audios while I introduce them one by one. Okay. So today we have Chidinma Abiakalam. Okay, and I'm happy to say that we have seasoned speakers today. So you should just sit back and wait for another some time. So who is Chidinma? Chidinma is an emotional wellness consultant, a childhood consultant, and mental health facilitator. She qualified from the Modern Montessori Institute in London. She holds a certificate in mental health for children and adolescents from the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Lagos. So she has been involved in training, even at the Modern Montessori Institute, Beautiful Mind Learning Services, and Tech and Trench Educational Services. In the last 10 years, she has successfully Sorry, were you hearing me earlier? I thought I just saw mute. Can I get the feedback?
We couldn't hear you for a bit. Suddenly it went on mute.
Oh, okay. I guess I will just start all over again. So good evening once again. Good evening, everyone. Harassment, bullying, and violence, and strategies to addressing psychosocial threats in today's work environment. So to jump into that, we have three awesome speakers that will be doing justice to the topic today. And apart from that, this session will be moderated by our very own Dr. Lanre, who is the lead physician for Medbury Medical Services. Well, that's the occupational health arm of Medbury Medical Services. So starting off, without waste of time, I will start by introducing Madam Chidinma Abiakalam. Madam Chidinma Abiakalam is a childhood consultant and mental health facilitator. She qualified from the Modern Montessori Institute in London. Chidinma holds a certificate in mental health for children and adolescents from Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital. Please, if you are not talking, get muted. Okay, she has worked as a trainer at Modern Montessori Institute, Beautiful Mind Learning Services, and Trench Educational Services. In the last 10 years, she has extensively implemented mental health and parenting workshops, seminars, conferences, consultations, and counseling for schools, businesses, and families. She helps her clients strengthen work and personal relationships, shift perspective, and discover new opportunities and hacks. So today I welcome you, Chidinma Abiakalam.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Akindele.
So great to have you in the house today.
Yeah, I'm also excited.
Interesting. Okay. So moving forward, I go to Bukola Daniel-Durotiwon. Bukola is a trained lawyer with over 20 years experience in consulting and legal advisory practice, working in leading professional services firm, commercial law practice, and as an in-house counsel in global integrated energy company. She is passionate about working with young people and performing art. So today, can you kindly give me a warm welcome to Bukola?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So we also have Faith Akintunde. Faith is a guru in HR. If I start talking about Faith today, but I guess if you have been familiar with our session, you definitely know Faith. I won't talk much about Faith. She is the current HR director for. Help me mention your company yourself.
Kimberly Clark, the makers of Huggies and
Kimberly Clark. Never mind me. So thank you for joining me. So last week we have Lanre Ajayi, Dr. Lanre Ajayi on the call. Dr. Lanre, I'm yet to see your face. I'm not sure.
You should be able to see my face now, I believe so.
Okay, let me stop sharing screen. Okay, so Dr. Lanre, I think I will hand over to you at this point in time.
Okay, thank you so much, Akin. Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another of our quarterly webinars. It's always a time of learning something new when we come around to look at the topic we have for each of our webinars, pardon me. And the webinar today is the first this year, as you can imagine, and we tend to do this once every quarter. We will be back in touch to let you know when the next one will be after today. Akin has done a wonderful job of introducing our panelists today. We've got an array of wonderful people. I'm trying to adjust to my screen to be sure I'm looking straight at the camera. We've got an array of wonderful people to, delve into this very, very interesting topic, and we will be going straight into it. Just a few points for people to bear in mind as you join the webinar itself. So we will have questions. We will take questions at the end of it. We'll encourage you to put your question in the comment box rather than try to ask the question in session. So please feel free to dump your questions in the comment box, and we will pick them at the end of the session. Another thing to mention is I believe that somewhere along the session we will be having a poll that Akin will be putting up, and it will be something along the lines of if letting us know if you've been a victim of any of the psychosocial threat or risk that we'll be talking about today. Of course, the poll is entirely anonymous. It has no way to trace it to the respondent, but it's just to gather the pulse of the house in relation to the topic. Now, with that said, let's go straight into it. Welcome, everybody. Today we are a bit tilted on the gender balance, and I think it's 3-1, 3 females to 1 male, and I hope I survive. Right.
Blessed are you amongst women.
Blessed am I amongst women. Fantastic. I love that. Great. Okay. So let's. We all know what we are talking about today. We are talking about workplace harassment, workplace bullying, but I want to also include the concept of workplace discrimination and victimization. And then we'll talk about violence in the workplace. And these, in my mind, are very, very sensitive, can be very, very sensitive topics. They are also very important, and we just want to explore, the topic a bit deeper today with all of you, and tapping into your wealth of experience and see if this is even a big problem in the Nigerian work environment. what organizations need to know, what they need to be prepared for, what are the ugly incidents that can be fallout from not managing these risks very well. So let's start right away. Let me see who I want to start with. Bukola, if you don't mind. We talk about bullying, we talk about harassment, we talk about discrimination, victimization. Can you please help us understand what these things really mean, if you don't mind? Bukola, please.
Okay. So good evening again, everyone, and thank you again for having me. I'm sorry if it seems like I missed out on something because I don't know, the connection is a bit funny here. But I think if I heard right, you're asking to help to understand these concepts.
That's correct.
What we mean by workplace as harassment, bullying, discrimination, and victimization. So for harassment itself, harassment is actually what you would term some kind of unfair conduct, not always in conduct, but it could be verbal. It could be, it could be non-verbal. As we know, communication is both, verbal communication and non-verbal. But it's an attitude or conduct or words that are actually targeted at an individual, another person, that make the person actually feel feel some form of emotional or physical stress. Sounds a bit broad, but you will note that I'm using the word feels, because again, at the end of the day, it's not so much as to what I think I am doing as the person who is, inflicting this harassment. I may feel, oh, it's a joke, but what counts is how the person receives it. So it's more from the angle of the recipient. And I know that, my colleagues, Daniel, let me just say, would be able to speak better to that. For bullying, bullying is more unwanted. It is offensive, humiliating behavior, undermines another person. So when we use the word undermines, it means typically there is someone who is in a who actually is seen as being in more control, having control, or being in a superior, and I use that word carefully, in a superior position, meaning, for instance, in terms of the workplace, such person would be from a manager to. So that person who is the manager is considered to be in a superior position, and whatever that person does that is offensive on one is targeted at an individual. So, we need to understand that there are people in work environments that are generally tough on everyone. Let me use the word tough.
Okay, Bukola, if I can stop you for a moment, if I can stop you for a minute, thank you. I mean, people have said to me, if you invite a lawyer to your party, they are just going to steal the show and just keep talking. Great. Thank you. We'll come back to that. I think you struck two very important chords. You said that it is more about how somebody perceives these treatments that constitute bullying. If you can help mute people, please. So I was saying you struck on a very important chord, and when you say that it has to do more about the perception of the person who's at the other end. Let's call them the victim. Okay, how do they perceive, the actions that is being thrown at them, rather than the intention of the person who is doing the action? And I think that's very important. We'll come to that in a moment. And you also struck another important chord when you said it's usually between a superior to their subordinate, indicating that usually there is a power gap. Again, that's another thing we will come back to. If I can turn to yourself briefly, Faith. So Bukola tried to help us understand harassment in the first place. Then she went on to describe bullying. How do you want to take these thoughts further, particularly when you look at discrimination and victimization?
Okay, I want to first thank you for the opportunity to be here, right? I think it's a great platform to have such conversations as this. I'd like to quickly touch a bit on where we're coming from. When someone bullies the other person, you make the person feel less. It's not about intention most times, it's about the recipients, like she said. And that's a very good, solid one, Dr. Bukola. Or sorry, is this my learned colleague, right?
Barrister
Bukola. Yes, sorry. So in terms of harassment, right? If I get you, Dr. Lanre, in terms of harassment and
victimization.
I think it starts also from the person that is doling it out, right? It might also not be much of intention, but the moment it gets physical or verbal, and you are making some impression that makes the person, at the end of the day, it is still the outcome of feeling less than the person that is doling out this behavior, or this words, or this actions. Now, if we bring it to the workplace, it's, I mean, maybe 1 out of 10 occasions that you will find a boss maybe physically hitting someone, right? But if we want to bring it to context of emotional, mental, verbal, a lot of it happens in the workplace where sometimes the person doing it is not even aware. I've been privileged to work in the factory space for a couple of years, and we've had cases of people being physically bullied, right? And it's what we've seen, the pattern has been that it usually starts from the verbal harassment, and then you want to just make sure that this person accepts you as the boss. You're already the boss. Whether we like it or not, you're already the boss. So there is no point usurping that office, if I would say. And I mean, today I'd like to have this conversation from the point of view of what we want to see in the workplace. What do we really want to see? We have seen experiences and stories of bosses descending on people, on their workforce, in a way that is out of character for who a boss should be. Bosses are supposed to nurture their team members. They're supposed to grow them. They're supposed to inspire them. But we see the other dimension, especially in places where there's a lot of demand on physical energy or mental energy, a fast-paced environment. That is quite common in such workplaces. But we want to see a difference.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you so much. You know, that's another person who can go on and on to try to explain her thoughts. Thank you for that. We'll come back to you in a minute. Let's go to Chidinma. So we've tried to describe the concepts of bullying, of harassment, and we are now taking it to discrimination and victimization. What are your thoughts on these? Before I come round again on some other aspects of it. Chidinma, if I can have your thoughts for a minute or two on this, idea, at least from your own perspective.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Lanre, and then Faith and Bukola, hi, and then to everybody in the house. So if we look at bullying, because most times when we hear the word bullying, the first thing that comes to most people's mind is school, just like what happened a few months ago here in Lagos. So most times when people just hear bullying, they think of school, students, and stuff. But like today, we're talking about workplace bullying, and we've been hearing all the stuff concerning bullying. If we look at harassment, victimization, discrimination, it's all encapsulated into bullying, because There is the perpetrator, there is the victim, there is the act. And so looking at victimization and harassment is something that someone in the workplace targets the victim for whatever reason. They are intentional. Most times you don't talk about bullying without looking at the word intentional. It is intentional. It is a repeated act. A one-off thing cannot be considered as bullying. If maybe, for instance, I am the boss and I've had a bad day at home or in traffic, and I come to work and somehow I maybe lose my temper and yell at my team, that is not considered bullying. But when I narrow it on someone or a group, and it is aggressive behavior, whether it is verbal or physical or psychological, and it is repeated, such that the intention is to humiliate, to cause harm, to cause the person to be embarrassed, to cause the person to feel bad or to feel low about themselves, then we begin to say that that is bullying. Then when we look at discrimination, oftentimes discrimination is targeted at something around the victim. Maybe because I am female, I may work in a place where I have a boss who discriminates against me because I am female. Or maybe because of the my ethnicity or my religion, but discrimination focuses on something. So that is why we hear stuff like female gender equality, racial equality, and all kinds. Then when we look at harassment, just like Bukola and Faith has said, harassment to a large extent, the other person may feel or think that this thing is not such a big deal. But the person who is harassed is the person who feels, I do not like this act. I feel this is inappropriate. This is how this thing makes me feel. I don't feel safe. I feel small. And if it continues, even though this person maybe is communicating somehow through their body language or through their words that I don't like this thing you're saying, and the person continues, then it can be considered harassment. And funnily enough, in most organizations, there are laid out stuff that you can say, policies, that when this thing happens, the organization can say, we frown at this. Maybe when a boss sexually harasses someone, there are policies. But when it has to do with bullying, sometimes it is so subtle that even the bully may be, doing his bullying within very agreed policies. For instance, I may say, because I am the boss, I may begin to bully someone in my team and consistently, maybe verbally say things, I don't like your work is not enough, and then I may decide to give them demeaning work that does not suit their position. If I am called in, I may say, I'm the boss, I think she should be working here. But if it is targeted at an individual, it's done repeatedly, this person is feeling humiliated, then he's bullying. So sometimes all those things are interwoven and it makes it difficult for
Thank
the
you
bullied.
so much, Chidinma. Thank you so much. There's something you've also said, which again I'm going to come back to in a moment. You talked about repeated, and I think that word is key. So we've been able to gather a few words that I think our audience needs to bear in mind. One of it is perception. So we say that it is not only about the intention, particularly where harassment is concerned, it is also how the recipient or the target or the victim perceives that action. Is that right? That's right. And I think we also said, we also talked about repeated, which is what you've talked about now. Okay. And you also talked about something which I think I'm going to direct to Bukola now, because I think there's a lot of legal connotation in it. When we talk about discrimination, I think then that goes to talk about what is generally in law referred to, when we talk about anti-discrimination law now, protected characteristics. And these protected characteristics are, as Chidinma tried to say, could be religion, could be gender, could be age, could be political affiliation, could be sexual orientation, could be gender reassignment, and things like that. Bukola, what are your thoughts about how these protected characteristics come to play in the workplace to become discrimination?
Thank you, Dr. Lanre. And again, thank you to all the ladies who have just spoken, Chidinma and to Faith. Regarding discrimination, actually under law, there are, as you said, protected characteristics. The idea is that a person should be treated with dignity, whether or not they are of a different gender, of a different race, of a different ethnic origin, even disability or physical characteristics, even religion or even political affiliation. When it comes to the workplace and discrimination in the workplace, the idea is that every person in the workplace should be seen as, well, the same. When I say the same, it means the treatment that is meted out, or the treatment or the benefits that A receives should be the same that B will receive. And I say that cautiously. I'm not saying that, in terms of pay or salary, people should be paid the same across board, but it means that every organization should have uniform parameters. Let me use that carefully. I think the essence is to have uniform parameters under which which form the basis for treating employees in the workplace. So a person will not be discriminated against simply because he comes from a certain part of the country. And whoever it is that is the boss in the office, has more or is more sentimentally attached to persons from another set. Because a lot of times when we talk about discrimination, and I know we're approaching International Women's Day, we're going to be talking again about discrimination against women and all of that, but it could even be the other way around. It may be against men. There are people who prefer to work with women and don't want to work with men, or people who prefer to work with people of a certain religious affiliation than others. So, but again, it goes to the fundamental rights of a person as enshrined in the Nigerian Constitution. You have a right to be treated with dignity, irrespective of your affiliation.
Fantastic. I think the hit word there is dignity, the right to dignity, and it can be across any of these protected characteristics. Thank you so much, Bukola, for that. Faith, we've spent a bit of time trying to understand these different concepts, and we've seen that sometimes they are difficult to separate one from the other. Sometimes they are so intricately interwoven, within themselves, or between themselves, But let's go on to how much of a problem, in your experience, do you think this is in the Nigerian work environment? Is this something that happens? Is this something that gets to the table of, say, HR, for example? Talk to us about your experience of the burden of this evil in our workplace.
Thank you again, right? and here's the time to say, well done to Bukola and Chidinma for this, context of conversations, very intelligent and depth of knowledge that has been shared. How real are these situations or this concepts, if we may say, or these experiences in our workplace? In my view, in my experience, right, even though it's not like they're being reported every now and then, but it's as real as we know ourselves. It's as real as everyday interaction. And in my experience, again, like I mentioned earlier on, having worked in the factory space, it's more common in that kind of a space where there is a lot of tension on you, a lot of physical demand for energy. And when people are stressed,
why do you think it's not reported if it's that common? What are the factors?
So I'm going to get to it. It is the confidence in the system that makes it somewhat unreported, or sometimes people feel at the end of the day, what's going to happen? I'm going to be victimized again. Sometimes we do surveys and we have to assure people again and again that this is confidential, you are anonymous, you can share your view, you can share your thought. And people still feel that someone will want to dig into my responses to know that I said so, right? So people walk into my office to share their experiences. I mean, I've had experience before where a salesperson came to me to say, this is what I'm experiencing with my line manager. And they were afraid to share with me because they've had such experience in a previous organization and nothing was done about it. So I had to first assure this person.
Okay.
And then call the manager. It was a tough work to do. I had to call the manager to have a conversation with him to say, see, I know this is not likely to be your intention. And again, one has to be careful. It's not likely to be your intention, but this is what one of your team members is experiencing or feeling from how you've been managing them. So when you hold performance conversations, they feel that you talk down at them.
Hold your thought, Faith. Thank you so much. I'll be coming back to, to find out what the manager said, what they thought about it, and how you handle the situation going further. But let's give Chidinma an opportunity to tell us, if you can, how does someone even know that they are being harassed or bullied or discriminated against or victimized? I think violence itself is quite obvious, but for these other subtle ones, how do you even know? Particularly if it's from somebody of with a power gap to you, like a superior, and you sometimes you may just want to take it as, oh, he's my boss, he has a right to give me instructions, he has a right to call me names, he has a right to be angry at me. How do you really know that this is now crossing the line into bullying, harassment, discrimination, or victimization? Your thoughts, Chidinma?
Okay, so first of all, before I just answer that question, I wanted to say that bullying does not always happen with, it's not always vertical. What I mean is, it's not all the time that bullying is from the boss to the person that is reporting to them. Sometimes bullying is sideways, like two colleagues, the same position, the same level, and it can be happening. And then rarely, sometimes, bullying can also be going upwards, where the person who is reporting to the boss becomes the bully, like uses all kinds of threats to bully and get what they want. So now, how does the victim know that they are being bullied? The first thing is, how do you feel about your work? What is the emotion you feel every time you think about work? So if you begin to have certain symptoms, which I'm going to mention, then you now know that this work environment, or this my boss, or this my department has become toxic and unbearable. Because if you are happy to go to work, if you love what you do, if you feel psychologically safe in the environment where you work, then you are not being bullied. But if you find that you are beginning to lose your confidence, you're beginning to have a low self-esteem, you begin to second-guess yourself for whatever decision you want to take, you're asking yourself, should I do this? Should I not do this? You are becoming irritable. Sometimes that irritation or irritability comes home. Because you may see the victim and the person looks very normal, in quotes, at work. They look calm, they look organized, but when they come home, all the irritation they feel comes to the surface. Their spouses suffer, their children suffer, their relationships suffer. And then if you find that you're having insomnia because of work, you think about your boss or something your boss said or something your boss did or a particular email. There was a particular client I talked with at one time, and he didn't know he was going through PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder. And he said to me, every morning I hear the ding of an email, that he begins to have palpitations, even without knowing number one, he doesn't even know who the email is from. He doesn't know what the content of the email is, but he begins to just have palpitations. He starts to have clammy and sweaty hands. He just breaks out in his sweat. And before he opens his email, it's almost like he's going to faint. I had to tell him this is PTSD. And that was how he told me about the boss where he worked before and all that he went through. And then if you find that you are becoming withdrawn, the things you would ordinarily enjoy, you no longer enjoy them. Maybe if you are a Man U fan or a football fan, and then all of a sudden, you don't want to watch those things. You don't want to go out. You don't want to hang out with your friends, or you are losing appetite. It's either you're losing appetite or you are beginning to binge on food. Like everything is coming and you are eating, you're losing weight or you're adding weight, and you just, you know, that thing in Nigeria, we just say, I know they catch myself. You know, when people consistently say, I know they feel myself, I know they feel this work. And then, or you start to feel worthless, because I have still had people I counseled and they just say, it's not my boss, it's me. The problem is me. I'm not smart. I'm not intelligent. In fact, I'm just lucky to be in this job. And you start to feel worthless, or you even start to say to yourself, what's the point? Because there are cases where people start to have what we call suicidal ideation, where they actually, because of what goes on at work, and they start to say to themselves, maybe I'm just better off if I am not in this space. And one thing people do not understand is we spend most of our time where we work. In fact, I was in a conversation recently with someone, and I said to them, if you look at your waking time, your active time, you will discover that maybe it's more than 70% of that time is spent working with
That's
people
true.
and with your colleagues, whether you're working from home or you're working physically in the office. Therefore, it means that if you feel pressured, you feel unhappy, you feel harassed, you feel victimized, you feel all these things I have talked about, it can be summed up that you are an unhappy person. And it is not surprising.
Chidinma, if I leave you, I run the risk that you are just going to, tell us everything in your experience, which we love to hear, by the way. But we need to spread aspects of this
That's fine.
conversation. We'll
Yeah.
come back to the physical or the mental health or the emotional health aspect of things. But you also said something that is quite key, which I was meaning to throw to the ladies, but which you've already said. I think Bukola also mentioned it, that it's not always from a superior to a subordinate. It's not always from the top down, and it can sometimes be from the bottom up. And when I first came across that concept, I was saying to myself, how under the sun can a subordinate bully their manager, or their subordinate bully somebody? Until I spoke with a gentleman recently who, although has an existing mental health condition, bipolar disorder, but which is being controlled by his medication. This gentleman is a teacher. He has recently been posted to a boys' school, and he has been assigned to teach, the older boys who are preparing for their, exams, and because this gentleman just joined the school, I don't know what they saw in him that, made them see him as an easy target. And you know how boys can be, boys will be boys, isn't that what they say? And they started jarring at this man, they started, playing pranks at him, and they were doing it like boys do. And I tell you, that collection of events and situation around that gentleman from those students caused him to relapse in his mental health, and it is what caused him to be off work, for I think for about 2.5, 3 months, and you know what he told me? I cannot even bear to go to face young children, to face young boys. He didn't just say young children. He said, even my own 17-year-old, I cannot even play with him. It can be that damaging when we talk about it. So thank you for bringing up this concept that it can go either way. Bukola, we've talked about and we've tried to understand what these threats, this like what I call psychosocial threats, what they mean, how they sometimes play themselves out in the workplace. But there is no denying it. Sexual harassment has to be the number one, in my opinion, of all of these things. What do you think?
Thank you again. And yes, indeed, sexual harassment is, especially, I would say, in our environment, I think it's a big deal. And just to maybe take our minds back a bit, probably it's our culture. I can't really tell, but you hear people say, well, it's our culture. People are used to things like that. You talk about body shaming. Refer to people by the way, you can ask after a person and people are describing the person by their body, the way the person's body is. So general, but just to speak to, to zoom in on sexual harassment itself. Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favor or other visual, verbal, or physical conduct, of a sexual nature, to which are directed at a person. We've said it that, and thanks very much, Chidinma, for that these vices that we're talking about this evening are not necessarily, top down, but it could be, of course, bottom up. It could also be lateral in the sense that it could be people on the same level. But it's this, when you talk about sexual harassment, putting all these things that I've said together, unwelcome sexual advances and all of that, but it affects a person's employment status. Maybe you're in the, and I'm speaking in the context of the workplace. It's conduct that makes a person feel as though they could lose their job or they may not be promoted, for instance, if they don't give in. When we talk about sexual harassment, one of these things is even rape, for instance. It is something that elicits conduct from another person that may not necessarily be consensual. Again, it is harassment because it depends on how the person feels. The person may not even give in, but it is just words that are spoken at a person, describing the person in a certain way. Unfortunately, but I'm sure we will get to that. So maybe I stop at that point. But just to say that really it is unwelcome sexual advances. It could be male to female. It could be female to male. It could be male to male. It could be female to female. And I say this, of course, being aware of our laws in Nigeria. Thank you.
You are getting into the murky waters when you say male to male and female to female. Let's try to avoid.
There's no denying that these things happen. So
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh, I didn't say you were wrong. Oh, you are absolutely correct. I was just saying, okay, that maybe we'll do another webinar on that one when the time comes. But great. So Faith, we've all been made aware in the past few years. I think it would be the past 4 years or so, when the Me Too movement, took a life, and it swept across America. When I use the word targeting, for lack of a better word, directed at big bosses, particularly in the media industry. And then, but it wasn't long before it swept across the world, where people in Europe also started talking up. The American president at the time was involved in the row, and more recently, even in sports. And you probably remember the story of the Chinese tennis lady who had accused somebody in the Chinese government of sexually harassing her. So Faith, what are the different phases in your practice as HR that can constitute sexual harassment? Is it when somebody knocks on your door and is very explicit about what they want in terms of sexual favors, as Bukola called it, or can it be subtle and require some sort of grooming and expertise on the part of the predator?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lanre. The subject of sexual harassment is inexhaustive. We really can't exhaust the entire content, whether today or tomorrow or in an entire week
Next
conference, right? But
yeah.
a lot of times, and most of the times, it's subtle. Even the one that gets to the point of physical expression, right? It actually will start with the subtle moves, whether verbal or touch or eye contact, some unwelcome, I would emphasize that, unwelcome compliment, or there's a way you're dressed and someone comes to the office or walks past you and you say, oh, you look this way. There was a story in social media not quite long of someone that passed a compliment on another person, and they were really talking about their physical appearance and asking them if they've been nursing their baby well, that kind of a thing, which speaks to how that person appeared on the upper body part. Of course, the person's job didn't last that week because it's deemed as sexual harassment. Now, this person didn't have to touch, didn't have to hug, or didn't have to force this person into some physical contact. But the moment it is coming across as unwelcome, it's making this person uncomfortable, the recipient or the victim, quote and unquote, uncomfortable. It is harassment. If you pass a comment to, especially an associate, which a lot of us call subordinates, in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable or feel that you want something in return, it is becoming harassment. The moment you make someone, again, we have to be careful, with the cultural context here. Over here, it's a bit even much easier in a way to easily pass a comment to someone, and you expect the person not to overreact. The moment someone is complaining, you say, don't overreact. But in some other contexts, maybe in the Western part of the world, it is more complicated, more sensitive, much of a very thin line between when you are genuinely admiring someone and passing a good compliment, a good intention compliment, versus a compliment that is expecting something in return or to.
Oh, wow. Can you hear me? I think we may have lost Faith temporarily. Can you hear me? Can someone
Yes,
okay,
Dr. Lanre, we can hear you.
so we've
Faith
yeah, okay. I'm sure she will come back. But Chidinma,
okay.
Faith started to talk about the cultural aspect of things, and I had been thinking in my mind that where do we put culture in all of these things? The one that I'm sure everybody on this call will be familiar with is in the morning you see your friend, you see your neighbor, you see your colleague, and say, hey, hello, how are you? How was your night? And that to all to all intents and purposes on the side of the person who is asking the question is just a very cordial way of trying to find out, did you sleep well, did you rest well, and that sort of thing. But then if you say that to someone else and you ask, how was your night, they're already offended, and I think that speaks to what Faith was talking about. But my question is, the workplace today is a global one. It's no longer a Nigerian workplace. It's no longer many of the times you've got many nationalities in the workplace in Nigeria. And we just talked about there are cultural nuances, that we Nigerians, we are able to understand, and we are possibly able to forgive. But the question is, how do you then deal with a global workplace, when it comes to the issue of bullying, harassment, discrimination, where you put that side by side against cultural expectations?
Okay, thank you, Larry. I think the main thing is for us to understand that the world is evolving. life is evolving. The way we used to know things are no longer the way it used to be, or it now is. And one way, like when I talk about these things, one metaphor that comes to my mind is our phones. Just like 20 years back in 2002, when GSM made its way into Nigeria, we had the Nokia 3310, and anybody who had that phone was indeed a big person. But right now, if you have that phone, even a 3-year-old knows that you have, in quote, a palasa phone. So that has even happened when it has to do with emotions, psychology, and all kinds of development, human development and relationship. So in the place of work now, we have gone global, and we are now having all kinds of culture being intertwined. Some years in Nigeria, there was no internet. If I worked in Ibadan, I was strictly confined to my colleagues in Ibadan, and the culture of Ibadan was what we worked with. And in a place like Nigeria, permit me to use the word, patriarchy was the order of the day. The men were seen, the men were heard, the women were seen but not heard, and certain things just went by. So a man could just look at a young girl and say, "You're beautiful, you are going to be my wife," or even just flippantly say, "my wife." But right now, and then the young girl would perceive it the young lady would see it as a compliment. It would mean, "Oh, I'm so pretty," for him to call me his wife. But right now, because of the fact that globalization is taking place, we are inculcating the culture of the Western people, and it's coming to the place of work. You have colleagues who are from Asia or from America. We are now going to be more sensitive around what is acceptable. So if I have to speak to the men especially, I would be saying, just be sensitive. We live in a world where we just have to be sensitive. We can no longer throw compliments around or use confusing touches. Like before, a man could just pass a lady and tickle her and say, "Fine girl," or touch her. But right now, you can't just pass with those things. You're going to be reported and you may lose your job. So just the best way to handle this thing is for everyone to be sensitive in a reasonable way, both the person that is high up there or who is doling out the compliments or who is intending to use harassment to belittle someone, or the other person who is the recipient. Recipients here may be in the fact that, okay, if my colleague is doing something I do not like, I should be able to speak up. I should communicate to them, because just like Bukola said, some of these things are so subtle that the other person who is doing it may not even know what they are doing. But that communication has to be there. So it's not something I'm quiet about and I run off to HR to say, "Oh, my colleague is harassing me." I should have communicated to this person. "I do not like your compliments. I do not like the way you look at me. It makes me feel very, I do not like the way you touch me." At least you set those boundaries. And if they continue, then we can now begin to say, this is intentional, this is deliberate, this is harassment. Even though some one-off things we know is harassment. If somebody grabs another colleague and tries to touch them in an inappropriate way or threatens them, if you do not do this stuff with me, you're not going to get your leave or your promotion or go for that training or stuff like that, then it doesn't have to be repeated for us to know that is harassment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think you've led us from trying to navigate the cultural landmine in these topics we are talking to the organizational approach to it. And you were talking about it has to be reported. It's not because he did it once that you run to HR. So I think now that Faith is back, sorry, you felt that the telecoms world harassed you. No, you felt that the telecoms world harassed you. Okay, so welcome back. So I'm going to redirect the question to you in terms of what should an organization put in place to deter these sort of events or these sort of experiences, from an organizational point of view.
Okay, I know that the quick thoughts would be to say or put policies in place, write policies and all of that, employee handbook, those are the things we're here. But I think that it should start with an awareness. And I like Chidinma's perspective about communicating to the aggressor, saying, I don't like this, right? And this requires a lot of education. We need to educate the people, empower them to speak up. In my current organization, there's something we call Speak Up. We equip people to speak up. If you find a practice that is not comfortable or you are not comfortable with, now it doesn't have to be that it is written that this is unlawful, this is illegal. The moment you are uncomfortable with it, you've got to speak up. Speak up, right? Speak up, express yourself. It doesn't have to be aggressive for you to be able to express yourself. A lot of us, again, back to our cultural experiences or background, a lot of people feel that, oh, the moment I speak up, I've made an enemy of the other person. It doesn't have to be. It could be as simple as, I don't like how your compliments make me feel, or I feel somehow about the way you look at me, or I feel somehow about the way you've spoken to me.
So Faith, you talked about
the people. Sorry, sorry.
No. Yeah, no, I'm not moving away from you. I'm not moving away from
okay.
you. So it's still you. Okay. So you talked about educating people and you talked about empowering people. Okay. How do you go about empowering them?
So empowering them starts with showing them when let me start with the first person that complains or that gives a feedback. Whatever you do with that would feed the people back on what you actually make of this feedback. I could say empower them by creating whistleblowing policy. For example, we have a platform called Pigeonhole, where you can drop any of your feedbacks there and nobody would know who said what. And it's an ongoing platform. That's a bit of empowerment, but you really indeed empower people when you take their feedback and you work on it. Now, it doesn't have to be that, oh, an employee reported a line manager and then you sack the line manager and that is empowering. No, it is going into that conversation, digging deeper to understand or deep diving into these issues and letting the employee know that, yes, I took your feedback and this is what we have done so far, right? It doesn't have to be someone is eventually punished if they are not found wanting. But if they are indeed found wanting, make sure that you did make a statement so that people can know that, yes, I can run to HR, I can run to the leadership. Second thing is to train line managers to also cascade this culture of speaking up. So it's not just only HR being the arrowhead, being the one in charge. It is line managers being HR in their own spaces. And hopefully that line managers are not even perpetrators of these vices that we're talking about today. And honestly, I know that a lot of line managers still need to be trained and equipped to not be the aggressors, to not be the bully, the one victimizing people. Because at the end of the day, people leave managers. The managers are the ones that create the kind of environment that we find today. So yeah, write policies, create policies, but create that enabling environment, empower people, educate them, so that at the end of the day, all this means, all these interventions would eventually work and treat the organization as a well-meaning organization. Of course, it's not a one-day job. It is a continuous effort.
Great. Thank you so much, Faith. And I hear you when you say that when you empower people, you create a no blame environment where they are comfortable to come forward to provide feedback, in a non-judgmental way. And I also hear you when you say the organization must be seen to be taking steps after such feedback had been provided them, up until if sanctions will be required, if at the end of the day the person is guilty as charged following investigation. I hear you. Thank you so much. Just to remind people, if you've joined us in the last 20 minutes, you're welcome. It's the quarterly webinar for Medbury Medical Services, and today we are looking at the very interesting topics of workplace bullying, harassment, discrimination, victimization, and violence, and what are the strategies employers can take to minimize these risks. To also quickly mention that the polls are now open, and you can drop in your views on the poll, and at the end of it, Mr. Akin will go over the findings of the poll. Thank you. So, Bukola, as we're talking about these issues, we've been talking about it now for about an hour, and we kept going on and on about it is the way I feel. It is me. It's if I don't like it, if I don't feel comfortable with it, if it I feel it demeans me or it indignifies me. Okay, it's about me. Now, so everybody is now being careful. We don't know what we will say to him, that he will interpret it this way. Or we don't know what he will say to her, that she will interpret it that way. Oh, and then we all begin to walk as if on glass. Does it not bother you that we will then take away the soul from our workplaces?
Thank you, Dr. Lanre. As you spoke, I was just, in fact, I think I think it was Chidinma when she was speaking earlier, I just thought about eggshells, eggshells. And in law, there's a thin skull rule that is referred to. So you take your victim as you find him, really. Unfortunately, or rather, let me say that maybe it's not unfortunately, but we are now in a global workspace. People are now exposed to so many things. As Chidinma rightly alluded, what was a compliment some years ago is no longer a compliment. So if I had a daughter and you saw my daughter and said to her, "Hey, my wife," or uncle's wife, in the past it was, everybody just laughed. And even at home, you probably would be referring to the girl as so and so person's wife, and she would giggle and say, "No, don't call me that." But then it no longer works that way, because we've also found out that from subtle comments as such, which were in the past, people were actually being abused through such, and it never came to the fore. So yes, it is true that we're being more sensitive. I think that was the word that Chidinma or Faith used. Be sensitive. Be sensitive. We're not trying to take away the soul from the workplace, but we're also saying to people that, look, you can't always see things from your point of view. And I think that's what helps when somebody speaks to you, to speak up before you speak up to HR or speak up to maybe the ethics team or whatever team you may have in your organization, is to respond to the person and say, "Oh, I actually do find this unsavory. I think that what you have."
Oh, Bukola, are you another victim of the telecoms harassment?
This becomes harassment.
I would say harassment. Can you still hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Now we can.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think I froze a bit. So I remember some years ago, and this whole thing about bottom up. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this whole thing about bottom up, top down. I remember some years ago, I was speaking to someone who at the time was a boss to me, and I just observed that the person had lost some weight. So it was out of concern, really, that I said, "What's going on? You've lost weight." And the person responded and told me, "No, I will not have you ask, I will not have you say that to me or ask me about that." I didn't even know I had done anything wrong, until I went back to my office and I thought about it and said, why did that person say that? And then it occurred to me that there are many reasons people lose weight, and, addressing it in that manner. First off, we're not friends in that sense. This was my boss. The person may have felt harassed, let me put it that way, particularly if other people had been alluding to the weight loss. So I think the point is, yes, we're being sensitive. We're not trying to take away the soul, but we're saying don't be self-centered. Don't focus only on, what the comment I want to make. Consider how the other person would take that comment, and know that some things are no longer acceptable. Just punching a male colleague in the chest, or just pulling his beard and saying, you're also doing this bearded gang, or whatever it is. It may have been acceptable years ago, but it's no longer acceptable. It's proper comportment, I think. Some people may not agree, but indeed, that's the world where we are today. Some years ago, we were not using mobile phones. Today, we use mobile phones. So a lot has changed, and we must recognize that as the world changes, our conduct must also fit. Appropriate conduct must also be applied. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great. I mean, you ladies have just been fantastic from right to left to center and back to left. Thank you. And you talked about technology, Bukola. You said we didn't use mobile phones before. Now everybody uses mobile phones, and it leads me to the idea of cyberbullying and Chidinma. Cyberbullying is not just a buzzword in today's environment, even in today's workplace. It is a real concern. Do you mind sharing with us your thoughts around cyberbullying in the workplace, and what constitutes this vice, if you may?
Okay. So cyberbullying seems to be the big deal now when it has to do with bullying, because a lot of people hide behind electronic gadgets. So cyberbullying has to do with any form of bullying that takes the form of an electronic device. So if at work, maybe you have a colleague or a boss or whoever that uses emails, text messages, social media to just make your life miserable, then that is cyberbullying. And it could come in form of threats. Some people won't threaten you like physically, but they go to the text and they say, if you don't submit these reports, just know you are fired. That is cyberbullying. Or they post, maybe someone in the office posts a picture of you that is not appropriate on social media. That is cyberbullying. Or you have a boss or a supervisor who consistently micromanages you using maybe text message or emails to know where are you now, at what point of this report are you in. That kind of micromanaging, as though this person is stifling your life. That is cyberbullying. Just like the example I was giving about the guy who says every time he gets an email ping on his system or his phone or his laptop, he begins to have all those palpitations. And that's not because there is a physical hand that comes out to give him punches. It's because of the content. There are certain emails you read. It is so caustic. There is this thing that they say that words cannot break me, only words can't break my bones, but just what, as in real things can break my bones, but not words. But that's not correct. Because if you check, even in the mental health space, when most of the clients we deal with, you discover that there are very few of them whose issue is the physical abuse. Oftentimes is words, the things that has been said, the tone with which it was said. So now people just go to text messages and they type, and you even see wars that go on, exchange of emails and all kinds of stuff. So if that is happening in the workplace, that is cyberbullying.
Fantastic. I like your examples, Chidinma. I really like them. And I think Faith she's raising her finger to say something. Please carry on.
I wanted to chip in something. Chidinma, that was a very solid contribution. And, cyberbullying has become like another world of its own in this era of remote work. Because as it is now, a lot of companies have gone hybrid, a lot have even gone 100% remote, and cyberbullying has now become like the order of the day. Now, I'm more passionate about this because the world of the virtual world is tending to be now more real than the real world. and you find someone writes a sentence in a way, and that sentence means, it sort of reverberates, and you just feel like that's the end of your career because someone has sent you a message that makes you feel, come on. Look at the instance of the mail that was sent and the person is so scared to open emails. I think that one of the ways we can resolve this, and I know Dr. Lanre might ask that, so let's just quickly jump into it, is a lot of conversations, transactions that go by mail, yes, can happen by mail, but there is always the better part of having a conversation around it. Oh, I'm going to send you a mail, or I just sent you an email. This is what I'm talking about. So that we sort of cut short the tension that comes with misunderstanding or misconstruing what someone has said via their email. And if possible, of course, training is not out of place. Some mails you will read, you'll be like, come on. Thank you, Dr. Lanre.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you did preempt my question, and so you've saved me time by just answering it in your response. Thank you. And just to remind those who have not contributed in the poll I believe is still open, and you can quickly contribute as we begin to wind down. To yourself, Bukola, is there any law that protects the victim of this workplace psychosocial threats in this country? If things escalate out of the workplace, after taking all the steps that Faith told us to do, speak with the person, try to let them know you don't like it, escalate it to HR, they do something, they don't do something, but things can really spiral out of control and get out of that. Is there any protection in our judicial system?
Thank you, Dr. Lanre. And I must say that I've learned a lot, just sitting and listening also to others speak. Our laws in Nigeria are not very developed, I must say, to address these vices in the workplace. We do have laws. So, for instance, I would say that the Lagos State criminal law, for instance, actually prohibits any form of sexual harassment. There is law that prohibits that, and a person who is actually found guilty can be jailed for 3 years. Again, the issue, and I've seen from the chats, the comments that people have made, the issue is who's going to speak up. Thankfully, a few people are speaking up now, because again, you can't address it if people are not speaking up and if public examples are not being made. So indeed, we do have some laws. So I'll take, for instance, sexual harassment. There is that law of Lagos State. There is a law, the criminal code, which actually applies to the southern part of Nigeria broadly, also speaks about assault, sexual assault. But when you read the wording of the law, it's almost geared towards actual physical assault. But as we've said this evening, and I hope you can still hear me, I feel like I'm frozen.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can hear you.
Thank you. As we've heard this evening, it could be non-verbal. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal or physical. There is also the Cyber Crimes Act that we have, which of course is as a result of activity on social media. Again, that act is there, but it doesn't cover all the forms of bullying that you can talk about. It doesn't cover, for instance, trolling. Just as Chidinma was speaking, we didn't. There are things like trolling where people just they come on your page and they're commenting and sending things, and even they actually recruit people to troll you on your page, send you private messages and all of that. Particularly, I would say, the celebrities, people say they put themselves out there. So, but that's not an excuse to bully anyone. So we have some laws, but they're not as developed. But again, even if the laws are not as developed, I think it is worth testing. It is worth testing, in the law courts. It's what, even if there is no law under the criminal code, or that we think actually covers the particular that I have suffered. Exactly. I can test it out. I can actually file a case in tort, which is more the civil, filing a case against the person to say, look, I've mental harm or emotional harm. Again, proving that is a different thing, but it is worth trying. We must test the law. Until we test it and the courts have the opportunity as well to speak to those things, to adjudicate on those, then our laws will develop further. But if we all maintain a culture of silence, or just we're just so, we've come to our wit's end where we say, it's Nigeria, I'll never get justice. Nothing is going to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bukola. I think we need to stop here. And I think what I take away from all that is that, yes, there are laws. They are not developed. They are not sophisticated enough to handle these topics we are talking about. But then you dare us to test them out. And maybe we will be able to build our own body of case laws in relation to these topics and develop them over time. Great conversation, Faith. Great conversation, Chidinma. Great conversation, Bukola. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Time never is enough when we do these things, and we can't consider to go on and on. So I think I would like to open the floor for the questions so that we use the next 10 minutes to go through the questions. Akin, do we have a question in the comment box? Hello, Akin, can you hear me?
Okay, Dr. Lanre, I can hear you now.
Right.
My internet also took me off for a moment, so I didn't get your question earlier.
No, I'm talking about the questions. Do we have questions in the comment box?
Okay, so we have some comments. Let me hope I can still find it. Okay. Yes, someone hacked. I think I should start from the beginning.
Please carry on.
Okay. Interestingly, I joined to find out. There was a comment here that in this environment we have, victims will endure until another job is available. So that comes with the issues of people not wanting to talk because of fear of discrimination.
Reprisals, yeah.
Yeah, most organizations don't address workplace bullying, and this is sad. As a comment, you're very right. However, I believe the comment here too that HR tends to be sentimental and sweep it under the carpet.
Faith will most likely want to defend that, but let's it's just a comment.
Okay, do you know how many people
been harassed?
Oh yeah.
Do you know how many people die, develop high blood pressure as a result of this? That's a comment. Somebody suggested that to encourage employees in the employees handbook.
Can you take that again, Akin? We lost you in between your comments.
Okay, so
okay. There are lots of victims of telecoms harassment today. So,
Dr. Lanre, can I quickly just say something concerning the reason why people do not speak up?
Please carry on. We've got about 7 minutes. Please go on.
Okay. All right. I am when you look at workplace bullying, harassment, because I was looking at the polls and I discovered that the poll on discrimination, victimization is high. And there was something Aki just read now, as in someone, the fear of losing jobs. So there are different reasons why, especially in a place like Nigeria, people will say, I beg, I don't want stress, that a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So instead of me to lose this job that I have now, let me just suffer in silence. And it's when people suffer in silence that they begin to develop mental illnesses and all kinds of issues that can now ripple into even their social life, their physical health, because your mental health can affect your physical health, because most times people who go through workplace harassment or victimization or discrimination begin to even have stomach pains. So if you find that every morning you wake up and you are having issues with your tummy. It's not all the time that it's ulcer or maybe you're having indigestion. It is just your mind beginning to express itself physically, or you find that you're always having headaches or you're always feeling dizzy. And another reason why people do not speak up is the fear of isolation. So it is not, so sometimes you have bosses that we call snipers. So you speak up, and somehow, if it is not handled very well, the victim is exposed. So the person becomes the bullied, or the bully becomes like a sniper. You know the way a sniper narrows in into one person in a crowd and takes you off. So you now become like, you have a boss who is a sniper. So people are afraid. I don't want to be isolated. I don't want to be the lone person in the pack. So they don't speak up. And another reason is people are afraid. They want to belong. They don't want to step on toes. And most importantly, they feel they will not be believed. So if I go to speak up that I'm sexually harassed, oftentimes in our environment, when we hear that a girl has been raped, by default, the question is, what was she wearing? Was her dress too short? Was her skirt too short? And once that question comes up, the victim has already lost. So if someone is going to come up to say, I'm being harassed or I'm being discriminated against, and then questions like the victim now becomes that doesn't mean that interrogation should not happen. But if it's just like, you don't believe my story even before I start, people just feel like they do not want to speak up. But at the end of the day, even if you cannot speak up straight to your HR for whatever reason, you have to talk to someone who is trusted. And just to add this, and some of us here may not be the bully, or we may not be the victims, but we become what we call the passive bystander. So I am not the bully, I am not bullied, but I'm just the one who just looks. And then I'm like, now, wow, I see what this person is doing. You are also aiding and reinforcing workplace bullying. If you are just there and feel like, I beg, stay your lane, make I stay my lane, make I just mind my business. So everybody, it's a collective responsibility that we all need to be doing to speak up. And so that the men don't begin to feel that this is a war against them, bullying can also be coming, or harassment can also come from a woman, because there are cases where it is the woman who is even sexually harassing a guy, even though there are a few cases like that, or who is verbally harassing someone. So I don't want the men to go feeling like we are the ones being hung here.
We're already feeling like that anyway, but it's okay.
Okay, I think there are some questions. There are some questions there. Please, Medbury, what's the advice to employer to curb all this? That's first question.
So I think
from Frank O'Hiri.
So I think Chidinma just talked about that. First and foremost, it starts with you, the person, knowing that you should be able to speak up. Of course, I think Faith also mentioned the aspects of the organization developing of course, a policy, a dignity at work policy, anti-harassment, anti-bullying, anti-discrimination, call it whatever it is you want to call it, but a set of process and procedures and rules, if you like, of how we want to treat ourselves with dignity in the workplace.
I can no longer hear Dr. Lanre.
You cannot hear me?
We can hear him.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, fantastic.
And we can hear him.
Okay, sorry that I'm summarizing for you. I just want to try to buy time for all of you, and of course, as part of that policy, there will be the component of the policy that talks about awareness, making people aware of what these evils are in the world and the very many forms and diverse ways they can present themselves in the workplace. And from there, in the policy as well, put a provision in for a pigeonhole or whistleblowing, where it is a non-judgmental, non-judgmental way of, providing feedback or even making a disclosure about something that you don't like. And thereafter, in the same policy, talk about the mechanisms that will be triggered once feedback is received, or in fact, an allegation. It may not be a feedback, it may indeed be a frank allegation is received, and how that will be dealt with, who will deal with that, and what the process will be after that. including and up to sanctioning and whatever the sanctions might be, up until dismissal if it so requires, because some of these events could fall under the HR category of gross misconduct, for which the punishment is always a termination of employment, of course. And then Bukola, our only learned friend on the call, said to us that there are also provisions in law that can protect, even if you don't feel completely satisfied that the workplace has handled it the way they should. You can then try to seek redress in court. I believe that's what we've said so far. Would that be right, ladies?
Absolutely. All encompassing.
Yes, you have captured it well.
Okay, thank you. Akin, do we have any other question while I keep my
Yeah,
eye on the time?
we still have like two more. If your manager doesn't hardly pick your calls, doesn't return your missed calls, and takes forever to approve your leave, gives you low score during your appraisal because of perceived opinions about you, which he or she is prepared to change, is not prepared to change, is that workplace bullying and harassment? I'll take second question to add to this. What do you do when your line manager and your line manager's manager are both involved in bullying and victimizing you and doing everything to make sure you are not heard?
That's a double whammy, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Exactly.
If we take the first question, I think the answer is a yes or no. Faith, I direct that to you. What do you do? And the person painted the scenario of your manager does not take your calls. They take forever to approve your leaves. They put you down in meetings. They score you low in appraisals. And this person says, because of perceived opinions about you. Question, does that fall into any of these categories we've been talking about all day?
Of course it does. It's a yes, it does. But
Yes.
how do you deal? Maybe you need to get some help, really, because it's really massive, the things you've shared there. If this was a question that was raised earlier, maybe we would have been able to break it down more. And it requires a lot of, multi-directional, because now you already have a position that you're perceived in a certain way. And that's why this boss is behaving this way in all directions, your calls, your performance at meetings and all of that. Yes, of course, it speaks to what we are talking about today, but you really need to have a conversation. Sometimes some courageous conversations can actually give us a headway. Some line managers might not be ready to change. Some line managers might be behaving in certain ways because they think you're certain ways. And conversations, communication can actually give us some level of clarity. And now it looks like maybe you don't trust your HR. So I'm sorry.
No. I think if they didn't before, they now do trust you. The way you've handled it. And the final question, let me direct that to Bukola in a breath. I think it is asking about if your manager, that you are supposed to be getting protection from, and his manager are all conspiring to victimize you or to discriminate against you or to harass you. Where do you have a fortress?
So thank you for that. A backup. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yeah. I know that most organizations have what we will call a backup of a backup, which is really that if you have such issues, speak to your line manager, otherwise you go right above, or they have a committee or a group of people, sometimes on an anonymous basis, where you can send emails. So this is still speaking to the whistleblowing policy. Hopefully, I know that not many organizations, some organizations may not have it, but I do know that many organizations have caught up on this and have systems, or rather opportunities, where you can actually go above those people in the event that they are actually the perpetrators of the vice.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Akin, I think you will, before you...
Okay, I think somebody is raising up his hand. Mbamba Ogadima. I don't know if you want to.
Okay, yeah, okay. So let's take that person if they want to ask a question very quickly because of time. Can they indicate, can you unmute them and let them indicate if they still want to ask a question?
I don't think it's, you can, Mr. Mbamba, you can talk.
Okay, maybe it's what I used to call an old hand, you know, that was raised before. Okay, so I think one of the things that we should very quickly say as we round up is what Chidinma tried to say earlier, that after all is said and done, at the end of the day, your health and your well-being, your mental health, your emotional health, and your physical health matters first and foremost before we begin to talk about organizational processes and systems to protect you. So with all that we have said in terms of how an organization may deal with this from one level to the other, up onto an ethics committee, an anonymous ethics committee, to the court of law. All these are organizational or judicial. What about you as a person? And I think that's where you also need to be comfortable enough to speak up and seek help on your own. Take responsibility in your own hands for your own health and seek help to reduce further damage to your well-being from this. Leave the work aspects alone, and you take responsibility for your own health. Akin, let's have the results of the polls before we round up.
Okay, so quickly going into that, we have 46 people participated in this. Have either in one way been they have been subjected to workplace harassment, bullying, violence, discrimination, and victimization.
Akin, we cannot hear you.
That's one feedback we got. So from this report, a large chunk, 52%. So that showed that there were multiple answers. So maybe somebody experienced harassment, also experienced bullying or discrimination or victimization. So we had a lot that came under discrimination and victimization, 52% each, then followed by bullying, then in line was also harassment, and nobody actually showed evidence of violence from those 5 options. Yes.
At least thankfully.
Comforting.
That's comforting, absolutely. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I think we've come to the end of it, even though I'm going to ask all of you one question, and you will just give me your look into the crystal ball and tell me what your gut feeling is to that question. The concept of the right to disconnect, which I think France was probably the one country, that was bold enough to enact that in law. I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And the concept of the right to disconnect says that you have every right as an employee to disconnect from work at the end of the close of work, the official close of work, and including, of course, on weekends and public holidays. So if your company policy says work finishes at 5 p.m., from 5:01, you have every right to not attend to work-related matters, including over the holidays, including over the weekend. Sweden is another country that just recently caught up on this, and I suspect that it will become more popular. To yourself, Chidinma, just one thought. Look into your crystal ball and tell me, will Nigeria ever get there?
It will be a difficult one for Nigeria to get there for so many reasons, but we may gradually get there, but it will be difficult because of the kind of work and style of work and all of that, and the economy. So because of the pressure to perform and achieve, it may be difficult.
You're not hopeful. Yes. Okay, thank you. You're not very hopeful. Okay, great.
It's difficult.
I know, thank you. Faith, your thoughts?
I think I'm going to follow suit, right? again, if we take clue from the remote working, the virtual work, how it has played out in Nigeria, and how a lot of global policies eventually play out in the country, we'll find, because again, we have different kinds of organizations here, the global, the local, and also we might not say that it would be totally taken or not taken, but it's going to be a mix of all of that. Okay, some would take on it, some would not. I know organizations in this, country that work in this country now, of course, a global presence that would give their employees the right to disconnect, to say, if you, even when it is work hours, if you feel that you are not going on well, you are not okay, you can actually disconnect, which is another level, beyond the legal framework, beyond the laws and all. So I would say it's a mix and match of yes and no, but eventually we would catch up. It might never be 100%.
I take that to mean you are still not very hopeful. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Bukola, look into the crystal balls and tell us your gut feeling. We'll get there.
I think that the multinationals will get there. They will get there because they are associated with these countries, or they are even headquartered in these countries. So I think they will get there. But because they are in Nigeria, and for all the other companies as well, I think it will be our own Nigerian variant of the disconnect. We will find something that works for us ultimately. But I think first and foremost, the multinationals will get there, and they may get there sooner than we know.
Bravo, finally one ray of hope. At least we know a sector of our employment will get there and eventually push us to create our own hybrid of the right to disconnect. It's been a wonderful time speaking with all of you. Faith, again, thank you. Chidinma, thank you. Bukola, thank you. Akin, thank you for putting all this together, and all of you that have taken time out of your beautiful Saturday evening to come and listen to all these wonderful ladies talk. Thank you for your time. We don't take it for granted. We hope you've been able to take in one or two things, and you can take it to back home. And for those of you who are managers on the call, I think a lot of work needs to be done. I would imagine you would agree with me. Until we come your way another time, we will let you know sometime in Q2. Have a great afternoon and enjoy your weekend further. Bye for now, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Dr. Lanre.
Bye.
Bye, Bukola and Faith.
Bye, Larry. Bye, Chidinma. Bye.
Bye now. Bye, Faith. Bye,
Thank you.
Bukola.
Bye,
Thank you all.
Bye.
Larry, catch you
Yes.
later. Yeah.
Bye-bye.